blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult, if not impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Thursday, April the 16th, 2026. Your readers today,
Jim Duffy
and Ken Drost. Opening USA Today to the front page, Trump's tariffs, still a big player. Some fear a new round. Others say it's needed. Bart Jansen, regular columnist for USA Today, writes, bicycle importers say they already cannot match the prices of China with U.S. manufacturers. A business that brings cheese in from Europe says a new tariff is going to cause lasting damage. A company that imports Cambodian sleeping bags for infants argues that added tariffs are going to have a terminal effect. President Donald Trump had threatened tariffs that each of the businesses felt could be the death knell for their companies until the Supreme Court overturned Trump's emergency duties in February. Now, those fears are rising again. In the aftermath of the Supreme Court sweeping decision, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer is investigating whether new tariffs are needed under the 1974 Trade Act. The goal is to combat unfair trade practices that burden or restrict U.S. companies. But not everybody is opposed. United States manufacturers for ceramics, medical supplies, and clothing, for example, support the idea of new tariffs to counter what they see as unfair trade practices in China, India, and elsewhere. The deadline for public comments was April 15, and nearly 300 poured in ahead of time. Hearings about accusations of forced labor are scheduled to start April 28th. Another hearing about allegations that other countries have excess manufacturing to send exports abroad are set to begin on May 5. Trump unveiled his tariffs agenda a year ago, imposing fees of anywhere from 10 to 50% on trading partners around the world, even uninhabited islands. He argued that tariffs were needed to raise money for the government, encourage countries to negotiate new trade deals, and force companies to relocate manufacturing plants in the United States. But the Supreme Court ruled in February that he didn't have the authority to impose tariffs under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Customs and Border Protection is working on a way to refund about $165 billion collected last year. Trump insisted he would get what he wanted under other statutes, and he imposed temporary tariffs of 10%, which last about 150 days. Another option for permanent tariffs depends on Greer's investigation. The agency contends manufacturing in China, Europe, and elsewhere presents a serious challenge to jobs in the U.S. because those countries produce more than what their countries need. The result from such excess manufacturing capacity is that countries export more, which the administration says hurts U.S. producers by flooding the market with their goods. Greer also is investigating forced labor in other countries, which provides an unfair advantage through lower costs. The International Labor Organization estimated 28 million people were in forced labor in 2021, which leads to cost advantages for industries such as clothing manufacture and farming. The Made in America agenda is incentivizing companies to invest and build in America, bringing jobs and production lines back to U.S. soil, Greer said April 2nd on the anniversary of Trump's emergency tariffs. But opponents of the potential tariffs contend foreign companies are providing products that cannot be made or grown for the same costs in the U.S. And business groups say they are improving labor monitoring to avoid exploiting involuntary workers. The head of Learning Resources, which imports toys and educational materials, and which won the Supreme Court case against emergency tariffs, opposed the new round of duties on imports. CEO Richard Woldenberg said, imposing different tariffs under the 1974 Trade Act would make a sham of the statute because the decision to impose these taxes has already been made. Taxes imposed on our companies is going to lead to job destruction in the United States, as well as diminished growth opportunities, Woldenberg said. Importers who oppose new tariffs say that other countries can manufacture products more affordably than in America, or that the products are specialty items from elsewhere. Radio Flyer, Chicago-based company behind the iconic Little Red Wagons, has expanded into bicycles, scooters, electric bikes that come from China. But tariffs on bikes and their components would hurt the company, already hobbled by changing household spending priorities and inflation, says Roger Payson, chief wagon officer at Radio Flyer. Additional tariffs will not spur domestic U.S. production of these products. They will simply raise prices for American families, according to Payson. Eli Kakshuri, CEO of Retrospec, which imports bikes and their components, said, the company with 60 employees based in Paris, California, already faced headwinds from a sharp drop in demand from the COVID pandemic. Tariffs on bicycles drive up prices and could further discourage customers, he said. Our mission is to make it easy for anybody to get outside and ride, Kakshuri said. Tariffs that price people out of biking run counter to that mission. Tavis Malcolm, founder of Morrison Outdoors, which imports sleeping bags for infants from Cambodia, said the company moved its production from China to work with a country that has a trade agreement with the U.S. But the company already pays 29% fees, so new tariffs would be redundant and terminal for a small firm, he said. Laura Lydon McGregor, owner of Peterson Company, which imports cheese and butter from the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and the European Union, said tariffs on dairy products is going to hurt the industry that already limits imports and has a trade surplus. Example, cheddar cheese already faces weight limits and fees on imports, said McGregor, whose third-generation family company employs 250 people and has warehouses in 3 New Jersey areas. Cheese imports represent less than 0.1% of total U.S. imports. McGregor said tariffs on cheese and dairy goods is going to cause lasting damage to U.S. businesses, should not be swept into any tariff action as a convenient tariff line item. Now, some industries, such as manufacturers of ceramics, clothing, medical supplies, they're happy with additional tariffs. They're going to thwart what they contend is unfair competition from abroad. Hector Navarez, Executive Vice President of Stone Peak Ceramics of Crossville, Tennessee, said either tariffs or import quotas are needed because the entire U.S. ceramic and tile industry hangs in the balance. Imports of Indian ceramic tiles exploded to nearly 24 times the 2018 pace by 2023, according to the trade group. Council of North America, that's the trade group, the Tile Council of North America. The group contends that subsidy programs allow India to produce tile at 75 cents a square foot. Now, here in America, $1.86 for the same tile. The fate of our company and the families who depend upon us are now uncertain in the face of a surge of cheap ceramic tiles imported from India, tile that targets a U.S. market that is priced so low that it is sold at well below U.S. manufacturers' cost. Walter Johnson, CEO of Acme United Corps, based in Shelton, Connecticut, said tariffs or other trade measures could help combat unfair trade in first aid products from China and India. Now, Acme employs 400 people in the U.S., making products like alcohol prep pads, antibiotic creams, hand sanitizers. But China, with what Johnson called extensive state subsidization, made much more of these products than it sold in its own country. China exported $1.3 billion in products like gauze and bandages in 2024, accounting for about a quarter of the worldwide total. India also exported the products at comparatively low prices, and Acme supports Greer using the Trade Act to address these distortions. James Poole of Obelisk Tech Systems said countries like Bangladesh and China give tax breaks, land grants, and below-market financing to support clothing manufacturers, which he said are unreasonable and discriminatory under United States law. The burden of U.S. commerce is direct, documented, and severe, he said. Trump has applied tariffs broadly so far, and industry advocates say there are details Greer should weigh in considering new duties. Despite Europe's trade surplus with the U.S., shoes head the other way. Carmen Arias, Secretary General of the European Confederation of the Footwear Industry, said the continent imports nearly 7 times more shoes than it exports, a total of 1.8 billion pairs, worth about 6.8 billion euros. Now, these figures clearly indicate the European Union is structurally dependent on imports, not characterized by excess supply. Cassie Abel, CEO of Wild Rye of Sun Valley, Idaho, which makes technical apparel for skiing, mountain biking, and other outdoor recreation, said the results of trying to make its clothes in America were flawed. It turned to suppliers in China. Abel argued there was a shortage of manufacturing for specialty clothes like Wild Rye's rather than an overabundance. After getting hit with $500,000 in unexpected tariff and freight costs over the last year, the company is exploring options in Vietnam, Italy, and Albania. But the transition could take years, she said. The current tariff environment has already imposed a significant burden on our business and, by extension, on all U.S. commerce. The Labor Department has determined China's Uyghur region relies on forced labor to produce cotton and textiles. Material from China ends up in garments produced in Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, according to the department. Ken Kaiser, executive director of the Trade Alliance to Promote Prosperity, said China's failure to adopt and enforce a prohibition against importing goods produced with forced labor justifies the United States restrictions and fees on its products. The effect of low-cost inputs and finished products made with forced labor ripple across supply chains. The United States-Taiwan Business Council acknowledged difficulties tracking labor conditions in industries that rely on migrants and brokers, particularly in fisheries and textile factories. But the council did say Taiwan committed to making unionization more streamlined within the next 2 years and prohibiting recruitment fees charged to migrant workers within 3 years. The monitoring and enforcement system in Taiwan was admittedly not fully mature, posing a genuine risk of its products being associated with forced labor.
Trump's tariffs still a big. Sorry, you just read that article.
It was a good article. Go for it.
Okay. Conservative Catholics hope Trump and Leo patch things up. From Philip Bailey of USA Today. President Trump has stepped on a political hornet's nest with his attacks on Pope Leo XIV that have infuriated Catholics worldwide. The rift with the Vatican could exacerbate an already challenging 2026 election season for congressional Republicans, as Trump risks alienating a key constituency. The president castigated the world's first American pontiff as weak on crime and terrible on foreign policy in a long Truth Social post April the 12th, then told reporters he was not a big fan of the religious leader.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:15.
Continuing, several conservative-leaning Catholic leaders have publicly called on Trump to apologize, which the president rebuffed, saying they shouldn't have to choose between their faith and their country. There is no doubt that President Trump's post insulting Pope Leo crossed, again, a line of decorum that plays an important part in diplomacy. Kelsey Reinhardt, president and CEO of Catholic Vote, a political advocacy group, posted on April 13th on X. Catholics are the single largest religious denomination in the United States, accounting for 1/5 of the population, according to the Pew Research Center. Catholics are 10 percentage points more likely to lean Republican than Democrat. Pew found in 2025. Trump lost the Catholic vote to Joe Biden, 52% to 47% in 2020. CNN exit polls showed. In 2024, he won over Catholics 59% to 39% against Kamala Harris. 2026 is expected to be a tough year for the GOP as forecasters shift more races in Democrats' favor. Republican pollster Brent Buchanan said his polling from Signal has been tracking Catholic voters since the 2022 midterms. He said that American Catholics have repeatedly shown their independence from the Vatican's policy guidance, but that if Trump persists in squabbling with the Pope, it could spell trouble for the GOP this fall. The papacy is an institution that has existed for thousands of years, Buchanan said. Even if you don't ascribe to Catholicism, you know who the Pope is and you have an idea what the Pope stands for, and it's usually broad, positive, moral things. Catholics tend to be one of the swingier groups in the country, and pretty much whatever direction Catholics go politically, the country goes politically. They're almost like a bellwether of sorts, so it's unnecessarily noise for an important swing group. Leo, who leads roughly 1.4 billion Catholics, clapped back at the president, saying he had no fear of the administration. He affirmed he would continue speaking out against the war with Iran and defend migrants against the Trump administration's intense deportation campaign. Political scientists note that Washington and the Vatican have been at odds over policy before, but this war of words is uniquely bitter. There's never been anything this public, this personal, or this partisan. David Campbell, a political science professor at the University of Notre Dame, which is a Catholic institution, told USA Today in an interview. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Vice President Vance, a convert to Catholicism, indicated in comments April 14th that the Trump administration won't be backing off and takes issue with Leo's anti-war comments. I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology, Vance said at an event hosted by the conservative advocacy group Turning Point USA. U.S. presidents have for decades courted a relationship with the papacy because of the growing influence of Catholic voters since 1959, when Dwight D. Eisenhower had an audience with Pope John XXIII. But it has often been a difficult terrain to navigate for presidents in both parties. Republicans, such as Trump, are often at odds with the Catholic Church's teachings on war, social justice, immigration, and the death penalty. And Democrats have struggled with Catholic opposition to their support for abortion rights and gay rights. The Pope is often viewed as an honest broker in international diplomacy, such as when Pope John Paul II implicitly criticized President George W. Bush over the war in Iraq. An NBC poll in March found Leo was more popular than Trump, which made his explicit denunciations of the war in Iran harder to ignore. It became particularly relevant as administration officials evoked Jesus and other references when asking for the country's support of the U.S. mission. Even conservative Catholics who support Trump's policies are wary of his tone. Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation, a group closely aligned with the White House, said the two men ultimately want the same thing for the United States and Iran, and that is peace. As a serious Roman Catholic and a proud supporter of President Trump, I believe the world would benefit from more direct dialogue between these two leaders, modeled after the fruitful relationship between Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II, Roberts told USA Today in a statement. Reinhardt, the Catholic Vote leader, said too many people are trying to turn a public disagreement into a grand showdown between Trump and Leo. That is false, and Catholics should reject it, she said. Bishop Robert Barron, who serves on the President's Religious Liberty Commission, said in an April 13th post on X that serious Catholics within the administration, such as Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, should meet with the Vatican officials to start a dialogue, which is far preferable to the statements on social media. Campbell, the Notre Dame professor, said those comments are indicative of how little can be gained for Trump and the Republicans in fighting with a popular religious figure such as Leo, who has been calm and measured in his criticism. He said Republican candidates vying to hold on to their congressional seats this fall will probably try to duck the dispute altogether. There really is no benefit to picking a fight with the Pope, Campbell said. More broadly, I think you should expect to see Republicans, particularly in swing districts that have a large Catholic population, will not want to be portrayed as in any way hostile to the church or to church leadership. Some conservative leaders are confident Trump's tie to his religious base will overpower any reservations about his disrespect for the pontiff. Ralph Reed, a prominent Christian conservative activist who sits on the president's Faith Advisory Board, told the Associated Press Trump holds a deep reservoir of appreciation among faith-based voters that can withstand disagreement over our social media post. That's important on the political right given the resurgence of faith among young voters, particularly Gen Z men born in the years 1997 to 2012, who are taking a greater interest in religion. As young people seek out the Catholic faith today in droves, it is important for the church and American voters able to recognize that the Trump administration's policies are a great benefit for people of faith in America, and we are on the cusp of America's golden age because of them, said Roberts, the Heritage president. Buchanan, the GOP pollster, said that events in April rarely affect the November elections, but that Trump and his allies must be careful given how Catholics are swinging against the administration. Polling shows a majority of Catholics, like most Americans, believe that Trump is doing a poor job as president and that they agree with Leo in opposing the Iran war. Asked how Republican contenders who hope Trump backs off while they seek re-election should talk to voters about the back and forth, Buchanan suggested that they should change the subject. My response would be, how about them Yankees? Interesting.
Yes. New York Bodega motivates kids about their A's, their B's, and their C's. A manager rewards students for good grades with food, even cash. Rachel Hale of USA Today writes, around 5 o'clock, the corner bodega at Heberton Avenue and Ann Street comes alive. Peals of laughter spill out into the sidewalk, mixing with the jingle of a passing soft-serve ice cream truck, and shouts of kids playing in neighboring yards. A gaggle of middle school girls gathers outside, creased yellow report cards tucked into their backpacks, while younger kids dart between them, some parents trailing behind. In Staten Island's Port Richmond neighborhood, Saks' finest deli might just be the coolest spot in town. At the center of a group of boys and girls who have gathered is bodega manager Wael Al-Selwi, better known as Wally to those on the block, and as Island Ak to the hundreds of thousands who follow him on TikTok and Instagram. On this particular Tuesday, in the afternoon, he's calling out nicknames and giving high fives as a group of students from nearby William A. Morris Intermediate School, number 61, show him their report cards. Let's go, Al-Selwi says, as he dabs one of the students up, praising the kid's grades on a recent math test. Over the last 3 years, thousands of students have come through the deli's doors for Al-Selwi's Grades for Grabs initiative, which incentivizes kids to earn good grades with free snacks and prizes. Those who score below 80% can grab $10 worth of items, and kids scoring above 90% earn their pick of snacks, a $100 bill, and a t-shirt. These kids are our future, says Al-Selwi. We're here to help. We have to help guide them. It all started on a bet. In 2023, Al-Selwi made 12-year-old Zamir Davis a bet that if he brought in his report card with good grades, he could get whatever he wanted in the store. Zamir held up his end of the bargain, and as he kept improving his scores, Al-Selwi shared videos of their encounters on TikTok. "I told you I'd get honor roll," Zamir exclaims as he runs through the bodega doors in one video, which has since garnered more than 1.7 million likes. "No way. You did it. He did it. You're the man, Zamir," Al-Selwi replies. Moments later, the video pans to Zamir's reward: bags of spicy sweet chili Doritos, a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, and cookies and cream milkshake, topped with Oreos and Hershey Pieces. "Keep going, you heard." "That's what I'm talking about," Al-Selwi says as Zamir walks out. Now things snowballed from there. People have traveled from Illinois, Oklahoma, even Canada to show Al-Selwi their grades. In November, during many of their local schools' marking periods, lines of anywhere from 300 to 400 kids stretched outside the deli every day. For months, he funded the program out of pocket. His brother Nash Al-Selwi, who is also co-owner of the deli, created a website with merchandise and started a GoFundMe as the program grew. It has since raised, you ready, nearly $500,000, and it's still going. So many kids were coming, but he's like, "Oh, I don't want to close the door," Nash says of his brother. To see his relationship with kids, with the people, it's amazing. You learn from it. Now, the deli sees a revolving door of students come and go through the afternoon, and yet Wael Al-Selwi seems to keep track of everybody, listing off fifth grader London Luster's regular order. That's a turkey sandwich with bacon, egg, and cheese for her sister Lauren. And remembering that another child's favorite soccer player is Cristiano Ronaldo. And Al-Selwi is well known on the block, greeted constantly by passing neighbors, even kids on bikes. "Keep going for the kids, man," a driver shouts from his car window as he rounds the corner. Another passerby high-fives him as he walks by. "You're the man, Wally," he calls out. Now, these days, the brothers see kids run straight to the deli after school to tell them about their test scores, even when it's not for a reward. For kids who play sports, the brothers have created custom Island Hawk jerseys. Every single test, they have to go and show Wally, jokes London and Lauren's mom, Tina Broadhurst. You would think he's their father. When the kids run to select their prizes, their faces light up. Some make a beeline straight for the chip aisle. Others pick up essentials like eggs and breads for their parents. Al-Selwi makes sure the store is stocked with all the kids' favorites, which include Bulldog spicy ramen and mega-viral propitious mango ice cream. For 8-year-old Theodore Latine Jr., who is in the 3rd grade in nearby LaBelle Prep charter school, that motivation was the extra boost he needed to improve his reading scores. It means a lot to me as a mother to have another adult who believes in your child as strongly as you do, who wants to see them do better, says his mom. It's kind of like having a village. Now, for Al-Selwi, it's about giving kids confidence. He immigrated from Yemen. His 3 daughters still live there. When the neighborhood kids come, I see my own kids in them, Al-Selwi says. He adds that grades for grabs is not about perfection. Students who improve from failing to passing get the same prize as those with top grades. Oh, no, not, "Oh, I'm failing, I'm just going to be a failure," Al-Selwi says. No, you're failing now. What are you going to do about it? He's seen kids go from 55% to 98% average on tests. It doesn't matter where you stand now. It's about what you're going to do about it, he says. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:30.
Pentagon press policy ruled unconstitutional. From the judge, department didn't comply with March order. From Brianna J. Frank, a staffer from USA Today, the battle over press access to the Pentagon and the First Amendment fallout over new restrictions on journalists continues to play out in court. U.S. District Judge Paul Friedman concluded in an April 9th ruling that the Department of War, formerly known as the Department of Defense, had failed to comply with his March order in the New York Times lawsuit over the matter, which blocked the department from implementing a restrictive press policy first introduced in 2025. The Pentagon responded by issuing a revised policy that closed the Correspondence Corridor, a longtime workspace for journalists in the Pentagon, and required them to have escorts into the building. But that policy, according to Friedman, invoked slightly different language to achieve that same unconstitutional result. The Pentagon cannot take steps to circumvent the court's injunction and expect the court to turn a blind eye, he wrote. This ruling powerfully vindicates both the court's authority and the First Amendment's protections of independent journalism, said Theodore J. Boutros Jr., a partner at Gibson Dunn, the law firm that is representing the New York Times in the case. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell said the department would appeal the ruling, maintaining that it has all the times complied with the court's order. Here's what to know about the case and its latest developments. First, what's the background of the case? A press policy that went into effect in October said journalists who solicit information from Pentagon personnel that is not authorized for public release could lose their security access to the building. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth described the matter as a national security issue. The vast majority of news outlets did not agree to the new policy, and scores of journalists lost access to the building as a result. The remaining Pentagon press corps largely is composed of conservative news websites and networks, along with non-traditional outlets. The New York Times sued the Pentagon over the policy in December, calling it exactly the type of speech and press restrictive scheme that the Supreme Court and the D.C. Court have recognized violates the First Amendment. In his March ruling, Friedman acknowledged the importance of protecting American troops and war plans, but said it was more important than ever that the public have access to information from a variety of perspectives about what its government is doing, given President Trump's incursion into Venezuela and war with Iran. That prompted the Pentagon to issue the revised policy that required journalists to be escorted in the building and shuttered the Correspondence Corridor. A new and improved press workspace will be established in an annex facility outside the Pentagon, but still on Pentagon grounds, and will be available when ready, Parnell said at the time. Parnell said the policy reflected the department's commitments to both transparency and national security. The New York Times alleged that the new policy violated Friedman's order in a subsequent legal filing. Now, what did the judge first rule? Friedman concurred in his April 9th opinion. He had no choice but to conclude, he wrote, that the department's decision to close the Correspondence Corridor and require journalists to be escorted through the Pentagon are not security measures or efforts to make good on prior commitments, but rather transparent attempts to negate the impact of this court's order. Friedman concluded the 20-page opinion by declaring that what this case is really about is Hegseth's attempt to dictate the information received by the American people, to control the message so that the public hears and sees only what the Secretary and the Trump administration want them to hear and see. The Constitution demands better, he wrote. The American public demands better too. He ordered the Pentagon to file a status report by April 16th outlining the steps it took to comply with the ruling. How did the New York Times and the Pentagon respond? The New York Times said Friedman's ruling sends a clear message to the Pentagon about its need to comply with the court's order in an April 9th ex post. We are pleased that Judge Friedman saw the revised policy issued by the Pentagon after his last decision for what it was, a poorly disguised attempt to continue to violate the constitutional rights of the Times and its journalists, New York Times spokesperson Charlie Stadlander said. In vowing to appeal the ruling, Parnell said the department had reinstated the security credentials for the journalists identified in Friedman's order and issued a materially revised policy that addressed every concern outlined by the court, he wrote on X. The department remains committed to the press access at the Pentagon while fulfilling its statutory obligation to ensure the safe and secure operation of the Pentagon reservation, he said. And what are press freedom advocates saying? Gabe Rotman, Vice President of Policy at the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, said Friedman rightly found that the Pentagon's policies still violate the Constitution and that the government's evasion of his clear directive cannot continue. The Freedom of Press Foundation welcomed Friedman's ruling but called for him to take further action, saying on April 9th that at this point, any court order that responds to the administration's blatant lawlessness with anything less than sanctions, contempt of court findings, and attorney disciplinary referrals is a disappointment. The administration will likely play more games to avoid complying with today's order as well, the organization said. Hopefully, Judge Friedman will rise to the moment.
Continuing now on page 2, Trump claims the Iran war is close to over. Iran, meanwhile, vows to retaliate against the U.S. blockade. Christopher Khan, Swapna Venugopal Ramaswamy, and Michael Loria, all of USA Today, joined to write this article. Iran has vowed to retaliate against the U.S. naval blockade by halting all trade in the Persian Gulf region as an intensifying standoff threatens to upend a delicate 2-week ceasefire between the warring nations. Ali Abdullahi, leader of Iran's Joint Military Command, warned on April 15th, Iran's military is going to block shipping in the Persian Gulf, the Sea of Oman, and the Red Sea if the U.S. does not end its blockade, the country's state media reported. He said Iran will view the United States' maritime restriction as a violation of the ceasefire and is going to respond with force. Now, more than 10,000 American service members are involved in this blockade, the latest move in the U.S. campaign to pressure Iran into opening the Strait of Hormuz and making a deal after initial peace talks ended without one. A blockade of Iranian ports had been fully implemented as U.S. forces maintain maritime superiority in the Middle East, according to Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of U.S. forces stationed in the Middle East. This is in a statement from 2 days ago. An estimated 90% of Iran's economy is fueled by international trade by sea. In less than 36 hours since the blockade was implemented, U.S. forces have completely halted economic trade going in and out of Iran by sea. That blockade could cost Iran as much as $435 million a day, according to an analysis by the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. That's a conservative think tank. The United States Treasury Department announced April 14 that it would soon reapply sanctions that were temporarily lifted on certain Iranian oil exports, a move originally intended to ease global fuel price pressures, but criticized by lawmakers for giving a country at war with the U.S. an estimated $139 million economic windfall. Meanwhile, Vice President Vance is dangling the promise of economic restoration for Iran if the country abides by President Trump's terms to end the war. If you guys can commit to not having a nuclear weapon, we're going to make Iran thrive economically, Vance said. This at Turning Point USA tour event at the University of Georgia. If you're willing to act like a normal country, we're willing to treat you economically like a normal country. The economic pressure comes after peace talks in Pakistan's capital last weekend failed, according to Vance, because Iranian negotiators did not acquiesce to the White House's demand that the country turn over its enriched uranium. Trump and ally Israel launched the war February 28 in an effort, they said, to ensure the country does not obtain a nuclear weapon. Ismail Baghei, spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry, said, "There is no timetable to resume negotiations with the United States," and reaffirmed Iran's demand that it continues to enrich uranium. President Trump said a day earlier another round of talks could begin in Pakistan this week. Quoted by state media, Baghei said, Iranian negotiators are open to discussing the level of uranium enrichment, but said the country must be able to continue enrichment in some capacity. Iran has long said it has the right to enrich uranium for peaceful energy purposes. Trump has publicly said any deal with Iran would involve the country handing over its nuclear materials and giving up any future enrichment. Baghei also said April 15 that a Pakistani delegation would visit Tehran to follow up on the talks in Islamabad over the weekend. He said the views of the United States and Iran will likely be discussed in detail. Since the U.S. and Israel launched the war, Trump has sent conflicting messages about America's military strategy and timeline for the end of the conflict. The president has repeatedly praised progress in negotiations while threatening further intense military action if Iran does not capitulate to U.S. demands. Trump again offered mixed signals in an interview with Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo. I think it's close to over. I view it as very close to over, he said in an interview taped April 14. If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild their country. But he added, we're not finished. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly. Iran responded to attacks that killed the country's longtime supreme leader by blocking traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, driving up global fuel prices and costing Americans at the pump. Now, even though gas prices on April 15 ticked down fractionally to about $4.09 a gallon nationwide, according to Gas Buddy, the average price of a gallon of gas across the U.S. has been over $4 for all of April. The oil price lurched lower again on April 15, although it remains well above pre-war levels. Brent crude, the global standard, was trading near $95 a barrel earlier in the day. Trump said he was permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz for China and that Xi Jinping, the nation's president, will give him a big fat hug for it when the two meet in May. China is very happy that I am permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm doing it for them as well, and the world. This situation will never happen again. They have agreed not to send weapons to Iran, Trump wrote in a Truth Social post on April 15. President Xi will give me a big fat hug when I get there in a few weeks. We are working together smartly and very well. Doesn't that beat fighting? But remember, we're very good at fighting if we have to, far better than anyone else. As of early 2026, China imported about 1.4 million barrels a day of crude from Iran, amounting to 80% to 90% of Iran's total exported oil, according to Reuters. Trump said he asked Xi in a letter not to give Iran weapons, and Xi responded that China was not supplying to Iran. Trump told Fox Business's Mornings with Maria, April 15.
Swalwell and Gonzalez succumbed to ethics earthquake in Congress. From Zachary Shermel of USA Today. The House of Representatives is cleaning house. Facing potentially embarrassing expulsion votes, Representatives Eric Swalwell and Tony Gonzalez, both mired in rapidly devolving scandals, separately said they'd leave Congress within an hour of each other on April 13th. Swalwell, a California Democrat, was accused in recent days of sexual assault and misconduct by multiple women. He has denied those allegations, calling them absolutely false. Gonzalez, a Texas Republican, admitted having an extramarital affair with a staffer who died in September of last year. Gonzalez said on a podcast that he'd made a mistake and had a lapse in judgment. Just 7 months before crucial midterm elections could shift the balance of power in Washington, the high-profile exits punctuated a new #MeToo moment on Capitol Hill. It's part of a broader ethical reckoning highlighting the power of female lawmakers.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. 12:45 is the time.
Continuing, over the weekend, the chorus of bipartisan calls for the congressmen to resign or risk being thrown out reached a fever pitch. Swalwell's gubernatorial campaign imploded in a matter of hours after a series of damning reports, and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle quickly soured on him. Democrats seized on the moment with an eye for an eye mentality, promising to force an expulsion vote for Gonzalez in tandem with their support for Swalwell's ouster. All survivors of sexual assault deserve justice, House Minority Whip Catherine Clark, Democrat from Massachusetts, said in a statement. The resignations of Eric Swalwell and Tony Gonzalez are an initial step in that direction. And Congress spring cleaning might not be over. Some lawmakers want to use the political momentum of this week to force the departure of two other members, Representative Sheila Sherfilis McCormick, a Florida Democrat who has been accused of stealing federal disaster money, and Representative Corey Mills, a Republican also from Florida, who's embroiled in controversies involving possible stolen valor, financial misconduct, and domestic issues. Sherfilis McCormick has said she is looking forward to proving my innocence, and Mills has said he's tired of the slander and the defamation. As it became increasingly evident that both Swalwell and Gonzalez's days were numbered, female lawmakers were in bipartisan agreement in pushing for accountability. Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez, chair of the House Democratic Women's Caucus, openly supported expulsion for both congressmen. Every member who sexually harasses or abuses their staff needs to go, she said. On the GOP side, Representative Anna Paulina Luna of Florida was behind the push to force out Swalwell. She too was prepared to kick out Gonzalez. We have successfully drained part of the swamp this week with the resignation of two very corrupt members of Congress, she wrote on social media. As prominent rank-and-file lawmakers swiftly drew red lines surrounding the disgraced congressman, House leadership was less vocal. Top Republicans and Democrats, wary of razor-thin margins, stopped short of calling for either lawmaker to leave Congress before his announcement. Speaker Johnson had urged Gonzalez not to seek re-election, but didn't call for his expulsion. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, did not publicly tell Swalwell to step down either.
And now a brief article to finish out the news section. The Dems are seeking to invoke the 25th Amendment. A panel would determine Trump's fitness for office. Fernando Cervantes Jr. of USA Today writes this short article. Democrats in Congress are moving to invoke the 25th Amendment against Trump, introducing a bill on April 14 that would create a commission to assess whether he is fit to remain in office. The bill, led by House Judiciary Committee Ranking Member Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, and backed by 50 Democratic co-sponsors, would establish a 17-member panel authorized under Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. Supporters argue the move is driven by national security concerns following his recent social media posts threatening escalation with Iran, though the proposal faces long odds in a Republican-controlled Congress. We are at a dangerous precipice, and it is now a matter of national security for Congress to fulfill its responsibilities under the 25th Amendment to protect the American people from an increasingly volatile and unstable situation, Raskin said this in a press release. Even if the bill were to advance, its passage is unlikely, and Trump would veto the message. How would the 25th Amendment Commission work? Well, the proposed commission would be comprised of 17 members. According to the bill's text, the Senate majority and minority leaders, the House Speaker and House Minority Leader, would each appoint 2 members. Then, Democrats and Republicans will each appoint 4 former high-ranking executive branch officials, bringing the total to 16. Those members will then vote to appoint another person, either a high-ranking former official or a physician, to serve as the chairperson. According to the bill, the findings of the panel would have the power to temporarily remove Trump, only if Vice President J.D. Vance signed off. Now, what exactly is the 25th? Well, that amendment outlines how presidential power transfers in cases of death, resignation, removal, or inability to serve. In those situations, the vice president is next in line to assume the president's powers and duties. Section 4 allows the vice president and a majority of the cabinet, or another body created by Congress, to declare the president unable to perform the job. The vice president then immediately takes over. The president may challenge the move, but if it is reaffirmed within 4 days, Congress decides the outcome, requiring a 2/3 vote in both chambers to keep the vice president in power. A 2018 Congressional Research Service report said that in a modern scenario, the majority of current or acting heads of 15 cabinet positions would need to agree with the vice president to invoke the 25th.
Turning to the money section of USA Today, new USDA food pyramid could cost $1,000 more per year. Guidelines call for more protein and fruit from Betty Lynn Fisher of USA Today. An analysis of the cost for a shopper to follow the U.S. Department of Agriculture's new food pyramid would add more than $1,000 to your grocery bill per year. That can be troublesome as consumers are grappling with higher grocery prices and strained budgets. The USDA updated its dietary guidelines in January, essentially flipping the previous recommendations and suggesting that proteins, dairy, healthy fats, and fruits and vegetables be the largest portion of a diet. But this comes at a time when food costs, are particularly proteins such as beef, are at elevated price levels. Research by Numerator found that if every American household followed the new USDA guidelines, grocery bills would increase by $1,012 per year, an increase of 32%. The new food pyramid reflects a shift toward healthier eating, but it comes with higher costs. Sean Postian, new Numerator analyst, told USA Today. That conflicts with the fact that 49% of consumers who would need to change their habits say that affordability is their biggest barrier. In addition to the cost factor, there's also the awareness factor. Among more than 2,000 people surveyed by Numerator in February, only 2 out of 5 people knew there were new dietary guidelines. However, some data was already starting to show that shoppers' buying behaviors were changing before the new guidelines were announced. Trips to fresh departments of the grocery store, known as the perimeter, began accelerating in 2023 and were up 7.5% in December of last year versus the previous 52 weeks, according to Numerator data. Yet grocery sales still are led by the center of the store, where products are typically packaged or processed. Nearly half of the total grocery sales, or 49%, are bought from the center of the store. Are bought from the center of the store, according to Numerator, compared to 42% for the perimeter and 9% for frozen goods. Also, as family size increases, the spending in the perimeter of the store decreases. Single-person households spend 43% of their grocery bill from the perimeter of the store, while families with 5 or more members spend 40%. Amelia Finneret, a food economist at Allegheny College and a dietitian, has some concerns about the cost for shoppers trying to follow the new dietary guidelines. While animal-sourced foods can provide complete proteins, those sources of nutrition can also be found in cheaper options, such as plant-based foods, she said. So, instead of buying beef, which is one of the most expensive forms of protein that you can get right now, combining rice and beans or combining any kind of grain with any kind of lentil is another way to get a complete protein, Finneret told USA Today. Another good and affordable source would be combining nuts and vegetables, according to Finneret. Also, sticking to the perimeter of the grocery store where you can find the fresh meats, fruits, and vegetables and avoiding the more processed foods that can be in the center aisles is good advice, Finneret said. But there can still be nutrient-dense food in the middle aisles that are easier to prepare and still healthy. Canned, jarred, and frozen items can save time and bring some monetary savings as well, she said.
More Americans are taking out loans. An average loan carried a $19,333 balance last year. Daniel DeVries of USA Today writes, American consumers are loading up on personal loans. The term personal loan, by the way, covers an array of products. Typically, though, it's an installment loan with a fixed interest rate and monthly payments that might stretch anywhere from 1 year to more. Rates range from roughly 6% to 36% or more. You can get a personal loan from a big-name bank, an online lender, or a credit union. Americans use them to fix roofs, buy hot tubs, finance vacations, even pay tuition. And they're getting more popular every year. The share of consumers with personal loans rose from 31% in 2017 to 38% last year, according to a February report from Experian, the credit reporting agency. The average loan, $19,333 balance last year. So why are personal loans surging? Well, one reason, lending experts say, Americans are coping with relentless inflation, struggling to afford everything from home repairs to summer travel. The shortest answer is that life is getting more expensive, and people are looking for new ways to finance it, according to Matt Schultz, Chief Consumer Finance Analyst at LendingTree. Also getting a personal loan has never been easier. Personal loans are more available, I think, than they've ever been, and they're more reputable, according to Stephen Cates, financial analyst at Bankrate. The personal loan industry has a bad rap, Cates said, because of a historic association with check cashing stores and payday loans. And I think their reputation is improving through better transparency, better regulation, and oversight. Bankrate, LendingTree, and NerdWallet all curate lists of personal loan recommendations. You're listening to a reading of articles from USA Today for Thursday, April the 16th of 2026 on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We will return for more readings after the short break. Your readers today,
Jim Duffy
and Ken Drost.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of USA Today. Your readers are
Ken Drost
and Jim Duffy. And turning to our sports page, Deion recruits top QB without winning NIL war, from Brent Schrotenborger of USA Today. Coach Deion Sanders has landed his newest quarterback of the future for Colorado, this time for the freshman class of 2027. But it didn't happen because Sanders had the most money to offer this recruit for his name, image, and likeness, which is the NIL. To the contrary, Sanders got a commitment from Andre Adams in Tennessee on April 14th, despite not being the highest bidder and despite having several young quarterbacks on the roster already. Sanders also didn't visit Adams off campus, unlike other coaches. He doesn't do that at all. So how did Sanders pull this off? USA Today Sports asked Adams' father, Kenny, who also coaches his son at Antioch High School in Metro Nashville. His answers show how Sanders knows how to reel in a top prep recruit, even though he's known to go heavy on transfer players from other colleges instead. Adams chose Colorado over Florida State, Virginia Tech, Oregon, and Kentucky. There were other schools that offered a crazy amount of money, said Kenny Adams, also his son's offensive coordinator. But it just wasn't the best fit as some of these schools. That wasn't the case. Colorado wasn't the highest bidder, but they'll take care of him. Adams declined to say what teams offered his son. How will Andre Adams fit into Colorado's quarterback room? Colorado has 3 scholarship quarterbacks already, each with at least 3 years of eligibility left starting in 2026. Redshirt freshman Juju Lewis is the presumed starter for this season and has 4 seasons of eligibility remaining. Like Adams, Lewis was a 4-star recruit out of high school. How will that work out? He saw it and he feels like he can compete, Kenny Adams said. He's coming to play. He's not going there to sit behind anybody. He respects everybody else, but that's why he's coming. He saw himself in that room. He saw himself in that offense playing. Sanders doesn't make off-campus visits unlike other head coaches, but his assistant coaches visited him, including then offensive coordinator Pat Shurmur in 2024 when Adams was a freshman. Colorado was the first Power 4 conference team to offer him a scholarship, his father said, which meant something to him. Then when Sanders replaced Shurmur with Brennan Marion after the season, that resonated with Kenny and Andre Adams too. Kenny Adams said he's been studying Marion's go-go offense for years. His son feels he fits right into it as a dual-threat quarterback who set a Tennessee high school record with 714 yards in one game last season, 507 yards passing and 207 yards rushing. They met with Marion and Sanders on campus in Boulder in early April. It came down to the feel he had, Kenny Adams said. It didn't feel like anywhere else. It was authentic with everybody that we met. That included Sanders. We got in there and talked for about an hour or so, Adams said of Sanders. He was just talking. It wasn't a big recruiting pitch or anything. We're literally just having a genuine conversation. I feel like that's something that stood out to me. He was just super real. Colorado had a down year at quarterback in last year when the Buffaloes finished 3-9. Andre Adams is a 3-year starter in high school and took over a program that went 0-10 in 2022, the same year Colorado was 1-11 prior to Sanders' arrival. Adams led Antioch to a 10-2 record last year, its first 10-win season since 1958. From last to first, that's the kid he is, his father said. He said his son has the same mindset. He's helped rebuild a program before. Adams plans to sign with Colorado during the early signing period in December and enroll in January. NCAA rules prevent Sanders from publicly speaking about unsigned recruits, but he did appear to celebrate the news with a post on social media shortly after Adams announced his decision to commit to Colorado. Lord Jesus, Sanders posted. Sanders just concluded his 4th spring practice season in Boulder and starts his 5th football season with the Buffaloes on September 3rd at Georgia Tech.
Moving back to the front page, Atlanta players. Diversity is great for baseball. Bob Nightingale, regular columnist for USA Today Sports, writes, they were set to line up the evening of April 15 at Truist Field in Atlanta, all wearing number 42, honored to be Major League Baseball's most diverse team on Jackie Robinson Day. Atlanta, 231 miles away from the birthplace of Robinson, and where Hank Aaron broke baseball's most sacred record by becoming baseball's home run king, may have the franchise's most melting pot team in history. Atlanta, which leads MLB with players from 8 countries and territories outside the U.S., is going to have a projected starting lineup that features 3 black players, 3 white, a player from Venezuela, a player from Curacao, and a player from Honduras. It is a United Nations on the baseball field. You know, it's funny. We always talk about it too. Infielder Mauricio Dubon from Honduras tells USA Today Sports, we know we are very diverse, and it is great because everybody embraces it. It brings us together. I just think everybody embracing it and not imposing, but just sharing our culture with everybody, think that's what makes us great. On some teams, the same white guys go their separate ways. The Latin guys go their separate ways. But over here, the brothers, the whites and the Latins are all hanging out together. It's great for Atlanta. Really, great for all of baseball. Now, Major League Baseball's African-American population has slightly increased to 6.4% this season. But there are a handful of teams without a black player. While the Dodgers broke the color barrier in 1947 with Robinson, when they took the field on April 15 against the Mets in Dodger Stadium, they will not have a single active black player on the roster, with Mookie Betts on the injured list. When Atlanta won the 2021 World Series, the team had 1 black player on the roster, and Michael Harris was the lone black player on its opening day roster just 2 years ago. But the franchise's most frequent lineup this season includes 3. Harris, catcher Drake Baldwin, and DH Dominic Smith. It's pretty cool to be part of. Truly, it is a dream come true, Smith said. Knowing the history of this organization and the legends who put on this uniform, it is proud to be part of, especially in a city like Atlanta that is very diverse and has a big minority community, especially with African Americans. This team can be a role model, the way it is so diverse, but everybody really connects. Alex Anthopoulos, the team's president of baseball operations, did not go out pursuing the most diverse team in baseball, and he not only wanted talented players, but those who would blend in seamlessly in the clubhouse. It's why he sought out Smith, who was beloved wherever he played. He was well aware of Dubon's makeup, bringing him in as a versatile utility infielder. He intentionally went into this offseason putting a high priority on character. And voila, here is Atlanta, sitting atop the National League East weeks into the season. I think it's great, All-Star first baseman Matt Olson says. To me, one of the best things about playing this game, you meet people from different places, different religions, different races, that, maybe you wouldn't have without the game. It's great to meet different people from different cultures and all come together to accomplish one goal together. Jackie paved the road for these guys to be in the game as some of the best players on the field. Every time you go on the field, it's hard to imagine the sport without the diversity we have today. Atlanta and San Diego each led Major League Baseball with 15 international-born players, with Atlanta having the most from different countries and territories. Atlanta had players from the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Colombia, Honduras, Curacao, and South Korea. on its opening day roster and injured list. It makes me happy, said Ozzy Albies, one of the 3 players on this year's opening day roster from Curacao. We have the most diverse lineup. Great lineup. What makes it so cool is that we can do it together. That's what it's all about. In a game that featured black catching greats like Josh Gibson, Roy Campanella, Elston Howard, Earl Batty, and John Roseborough, Baldwin is the first everyday black catcher in the major leagues since 4-time Gold Glove winner Charles Johnson. Johnson last played in the major leagues in 2005. Is that right? I can't believe it, Atlanta manager Walt Weiss said. I never would have imagined that. Yet it has been 2 decades since baseball had an everyday black catcher until Baldwin. He not only won the NL Rookie of the Year award last year, but also had been Atlanta's MVP the first 2 weeks, hitting .300 with a team leading 5 homers and 17 runs batted in. It's definitely a position you don't see many black players, Baldwin said. It's kind of nice to break that stereotype, give you the motivation to keep it going. If I can help black kids become catchers, that'd be really cool to see. In the meantime, Atlanta rolls on, hoping its success can be an inspiration to any workplace. You just look at what a guy like Dom has done for this team, not just his performance on the field, but the clubhouse, Olson says. He's truly one of the best guys I've ever been around. You feel like everybody's pulling for you on your team. But with Dom, for whatever reason, you just feel like he's pulling a little harder. He's just genuinely happy to see other guys succeed. Now Smith, who recently lost his mom to cancer, is a guy who will invite teammates over to his house on off days, and once even had several of the young Atlanta players over to his home when they had a rainout in Washington, D.C. in 2023. He's the type of guy that just makes every clubhouse better, Harris said. I think we were all excited when he got here because he lifts up every clubhouse he's been to. And to have him with us now, having such a diverse clubhouse, we take a lot of pride in that. It's a pretty cool thing for all of us.
The last domino. Don't believe the Big Ten has really passed the SEC? Watch the NFL draft. From Matt Hayes of USA Today. We're less than a week away from the final tell, the statement that could send shockwaves through the mighty SEC. The NFL draft, and more specifically, the SEC's unassailable place in it. No other conference produces NFL talent like the SEC. No other conference has more players on NFL rosters. And now here comes the surging Big Ten with its 3 consecutive national championship teams. From these 3 teams, primed for another red flag shift at the top of college football. If Michigan, Ohio State, and Indiana winning the last 3 national titles didn't do it for you, if the SEC missing the last 3 national title games didn't clearly underscore a massive shift at the top of the sport, the NFL draft will leave no doubt. For 19 years, the SEC has had more players drafted than any conference, a near 2-year decade run that coincides with its dominance on the field. LSU started the conference's run of 14 national titles this century with the win over Oklahoma in the 2003 national title game. The dominance on the field and in the draft has been unrivaled until now. Until the era of name, image, and likeness, the NIL, and free player movement changed everything, until the Big Ten with its deep pocket alumni bases and, as important, significant upgrades at the head coach and assistant coach positions, has blown by the SEC in the passing lane. All the way to the top of college football. It's not just the national titles, it's bowl games and head-to-head matchups over the last 3 seasons too. Since 2023, the Big Ten is 11-4 in the college football playoff, and the SEC is 5-8. But the NFL draft is the final frontier. The SEC held a 77-71 edge in total selections over the Big Ten last year. The last and final move of this remarkable paradigm shift within the power structure of the sport could play out this month. It won't take long to see where this is headed. day one of the draft could pull back the curtain. The SEC holds the record for the first round selections in a single season with 15 in the years 2020 and last year, and has led or tied for the most first round picks in 14 of the last 15 years, including a whopping 170 since 2010. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 1:15. Continuing, in his latest mock draft for USA Today Sports, Nate Davis predicts 12 Big Ten players will be selected in the first round and 7 for the SEC. But, like every draft, the projected 33 through 43 picks are also first round worthy, so the Big Ten's number could still increase depending on how the first round shakes out. That puts the league within striking distance of the record of 15, an opening salvo in what could be a generational change in the draft. So the SEC can ignore the 3 national titles in a row. It can ignore the 2024 postseason when it pushed for South Carolina and Alabama to make the CFP, and both were beaten by Big Ten schools, which were Illinois and Michigan respectively, in bowl games. It can ignore last year when Vanderbilt and Texas were the 2 teams that were left out of the CFP, and Vanderbilt lost to Iowa in a bowl game, and Texas beat Michigan. It can ignore Southern Cal and Oregon at numbers 1 and number 2 in the 247 Sports Composite recruiting rankings for the class of 2026, and the Big Ten with 5 of the first 12 in the rankings and 8 of the top 30. While that's a long way from the 13 of the SEC's 16 programs in the top 30, the fact we're even talking about the inroads made by the Big Ten in high school recruiting is a massive red flag. Recruiting leads to player development. Player development leads to championships. And championship play leads to increased presence in the NFL draft. Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza will be the first player selected in the draft. Ohio State could have as many as 5 selections in the first 10 picks. And that's just the beginning of what could be a glorious Big Ten affair at the NFL's annual player procurement party. Deny it all you want, SEC honks. The Big Ten is the new king of college football. The official crown will be placed on its head after the NFL draft.
Sneaking over to golf for a few moments. Back repaired, Thomas is using the mantra of trust and commitment. We're speaking about Justin Thomas. Adam Schupak of Golf Week writes, "Smart golf. That was the goal for Justin Thomas during the final round of the 2025 RBC Heritage. Sounds easy on paper, but under the pressure of trying to win for the 16th time in his career on the PGA Tour, that's easier said than done. Now, after all, it had been 2 years, 10 months, 29 days or more to the point, 1,064 days since his last win at the 2022 PGA Championship at Southern Hills. Thomas's toughest opponent on the final day proved to be himself. His mantras were trust and commitment. Trust his first instinct and commit to his shot choice. Now, he did just that, shooting a bogey-free final round 3 under 68 at Harbortown Golf Links and sinking a 21-foot birdie putt to defeat Andrew Novak on the first hole of a sudden death playoff. When the ball went in, that was pure joy, Thomas recalled. That was as fun as I thought it would be. A year ago, the 32-year-old's opening round 61 tied the Harbortown course record, the 4th PGA Tour event tying or holding a course record. It also marked his 9th career round where he tied or set the course record. Thomas also won for the first time since becoming a father and joined an exclusive club consisting of Arnold Palmer, Johnny Miller, Jack Nicklaus, Tom Watson, Tiger Woods, and Rory McIlroy in having at least 16 victories and 2 majors before the age of 32. Thomas returns this week to defend and enjoyed some of the spoils of his victory, including hitting the ceremonial tee shot to officially open the tournament week on April 14. To do so, he he donned the winner's plaid jacket and wore earplugs as he hit a ball with a persimmon driver into Calabogue Sound as a cannon fired simultaneously. That was very loud. It scared me pretty bad. But yeah, I was pleased with my shot, he said. I had no idea what it was going to be like, both swinging in that jacket and hitting a persimmon club like that. He also chomped on the Champion's Burger, featuring short rib, brisket, and chuck, topped with bacon, pepper jack, avocado, a fried egg, and southwestern aioli. It is on the menu at Fraser's Tavern, a local institution located in the nearby Plantation Golf Club at Sea Pines Resort. Thomas, ranked 15th in the official world golf ranking, is still attempting to get his sea legs back after missing more than 4 months, having a microdiscectomy, a procedure to remove a bulging or damaged disc in the lower spine. Thomas shot a pair of 79s in his first start back at the Arnold Palmer Invitational in March and missed the cut and said it was a humbling experience. I just felt like I was humiliating myself out there, he said, after shooting 14 over. I'm trying as hard as I can to give myself a little bit of grace with how long I haven't played and how difficult this place can be. But at the same time, I expect more out of myself. A week later, he contended at the Players' Championship, eventually finished T8. It's his best result in 4 starts this season, and he enters his title defense coming off a T40 at the Masters. Now, McIlroy, who repeated as Masters champ, opted to skip this week's tournament, as did Justin Rose, who finished T3 at Augusta, and Japanese star Hideki Matsuyama. But it is otherwise a star-studded field for the 4th of 8 PGA Tour signature events. The purse, $20 million, and there is no cut in the limited field event. In fact, 66 of the 82 players in the field have won on the PGA Tour, led by Scottie Scheffler with 20. Through 14 events in the 2026 Tour season, there have only been 2 first-time Tour winners, Jacob Bridgman, who took the title at the Genesis Invitational, and Ricky Castillo, who hoisted the trophy at the Puerto Rico Open, CT Pan 2019. That was the last player to win the RBC Heritage for his first career PGA Tour victory. But Thomas, who competed in the Junior Heritage as a teen and called the Pete Dye design a course that fits my game, will always treasure being a champion at Harbor Town. I feel like winning on a golf course like this is a pretty cool thing to add to your resume, he said.
Seeking diamonds among the defensive line trenches from Jack McKessie and Ireton Ostley of USA Today. NFL battles are won in the trenches. On the defensive side of the ball, cornerbacks and edge rushers claim the glory in interceptions and sacks, but interior defensive linemen can play just as crucial a role in disrupting opposing offenses. A great defensive lineman can torment offensive linemen with their strength to collapse a pocket or close a running lane. The best defensive linemen can turn those disruptions into production via sacks and tackles for a loss. Clemson's Peter Woods and Florida's Caleb Banks lead the pack of interior defensive linemen as potential first-round picks, but there are dozens of other talented players at the position who could hear their names called. How the top defensive line prospects rank according to the USA Today sports draft expert Ireton Ostley's big board of the top 200 players in the 2026 draft class. Number 1, Peter Woods of Clemson. Scouting report, Woods looks at times like a prospect who is 85% of what Jalen Carter offers, thanks to his mix of size, which is 6'3" and 288 pounds, and athleticism. Number 2, Caleb Banks of Florida. Scouting report, fluid mover for his imposing size, with all of the tools you could look for in a dominant interior defensive tackle. Number 3, Caden McDonald of Ohio State. The scouting report, the Buckeyes will have many first-round players in this draft And McDonald very well could be one of them in this interior defensive line class. Number 4, Christian Miller from Georgia. The scouting report on him: elite anchor and strength, show up in both run defense and pass rush scenarios. Number 5, Dominique Orange from Iowa State. The report on him takes on blocks with his big frame in the middle, and that shows up regularly in run defense. Next, number 6, Daryl Jackson Jr., Florida State. A huge prospect with 35-inch arms and massive hands that deploy his powerful frame very well in the middle. Number 7, Lee Hunter of Texas Tech. Powerful run-stuffing presence in the middle who regularly disrupts opposing offensive lines. Number 8, Xavier Harris from Ole Miss. He's an example of the planet theory. There just aren't many people his size on Earth. Uses his size, length, and power to be an impactful run defender. Number 9, Dante Corleone of Cincinnati. His short stature belies his elite strength and athleticism, relentless motor, violent hand usage that shows up in both run defense and pass rushing. Number 10 is DeMonte Capehart of Clemson. His scouting report: explosively athletic interior defender who shined at the combine with a 4.85 40-yard dash, a 33.5-inch vertical for his size. Not a lot of starting experience, but that may be have more to do with staying at Cincinnati. It's for staying at Clemson for 6 years. Number 11, Caleb Proctor of Louisiana. He lit up the NFL scouting combine with his testing and drill performances, an elite athlete with the range to be a playmaker consistently. Number 12 is Chris McClellan of Missouri. He has good arm length for his size and massive hands, which provide him a great punch off the line into blockers. Number 13, Tim Keenan III of Alabama. His scouting report: surprisingly nimble for his size. Shorter height means he naturally has a leverage advantage on blockers, and with good pass production, he has 45 pressures, 8 sacks in his last 3 years. Number 14 is Albert Regis of Texas A&M. He has great burst for a defensive tackle, a 34-inch vertical, 4.88 second 40-yard dash. Low center of gravity and great balance mean he can out-leverage double teams and take on centers. Number 15 is Grayson Halton of Oklahoma. And his scouting report: he's smaller, penetrating pass rusher from the interior with good body control and footwork, but he needs to improve leverage, understanding, and hand usage. Number 16 is Tyler Oidium of Texas A&M. He's an explosive first step with great length and alignment versatility, but lacks lower body power to be a reliable defender on the interior. And number 17 is Zane Durant of Penn State. And his scouting report: explosive interior rusher who thrives in slants and twists, but lacks the stature to hold up consistently in run defense.
Kelly, on LSU, I did not win enough games. John Bryce of USA Today writes about former LSU coach Brian Kelly: injury preceded insult. Brian Kelly was steamrolled not once, but twice as he stalked the sidelines in 2025 as LSU football coach, colliding with an official in his team's opening win at Clemson, and again in the Game 3 win against Florida. He would notch just 2 more wins as top Tiger. By late October, the insult arrived. Kelly was fired October 26th of last year, the only time in a coaching career that has spanned parts of 5 decades Kelly saw somebody else dictate his coaching coordinates. Since that time, the 64-year-old Kelly, Notre Dame all-time winningest coach before he bolted for the Bayou after the 2021 regular season, largely has avoided public comment or the spotlight. For one thing, Kelly's been rehabilitating the torn labrum he suffered from he suffered September 13th when 6'7", 317-pound tackle Weston Davis finished blocking his Florida defender all the way through his head coach on the LSU sideline. I didn't have the surgery done. I went with an alternative way of doing it with stem cell therapy and peptides, Kelly exclusively told USA Today Sports. The most conventional way was to get it done with surgery. But after what happened at LSU and I was out of a job, the last thing you want to do is to be stuck in a sling.
Okay.
Splitting his recovery between Louisiana and Florida, Kelly has absorbed his share of slings and arrows in the nearly 6 months since LSU fired him, less than 5 years through a decade-long, almost $100 million pact.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 1:30.
Continuing, I would say there's an easy, simple answer, Kelly said, of what went wrong at LSU. I didn't win enough games. There's a longer answer to why that didn't happen. I'll probably have to write a book about it. But there's always cause and effect. The effect was I didn't win enough games, period. I guess you do have to start with what is winning enough games. We were 34-14, 22-3 at home when I was fired. We had 2 10-win seasons. We won an SEC West Division championship, had the #1 offense in college football, a Heisman Trophy winner. When you look at what is winning and what keeps you employed, other people make those decisions. But it starts with what is defined as winning. And unfortunately, it wasn't defined as enough winning leading into being fired. Now, Kelly has heard the chatter about all those alleged tea times, of which in well-paid unemployment, courtesy the $54 million buyout owed to him by LSU, he's only recently resumed fully swinging golf clubs from the left shoulder labrum injury. If you believe some, I played 350 rounds of golf, Kelly said, which obviously is ridiculous. I probably played like 30 over the last 3 years. Does Brian Kelly have any advice for Lane Kiffin? Well, he knows what he would tell his successor, Lane Kiffin, at LSU. Lane doesn't need advice, said Kelly, who was faced off against Kiffin in the Notre Dame Southern Cal and the LSU Ole Miss rivalries. He's seen it from the NFL to SC to building a program. I don't know. I'm telling him anything he doesn't know. The world we live in today, Michigan just won a basketball championship with 5 transfers. You can do it. There are so many moving pieces. I don't think he needs any advice. I think you just continue to be who you are. Is Brian Kelly going to coach again? Well, he's out of coaching right now, except when he isn't. There are multiple schools contracting his services as a consultant, Charles Huff's Memphis program among them. Kelly believes he is meant to be a coach, so there's the time he devotes, almost daily, he says, to preparing to coach again. Watching film a couple hours a day in his home office in Florida's West Coast, plotting staff assembly, and the priorities of that next supporting cast. I think you look at everything you've done throughout your career, and you got a great process, and you know that process has been successful, said Kelly, a winner of more than 300 college games, who captured 2 NCAA Division II national titles and 3 times had Notre Dame vying to end that program's now 38-year title drought. I've had 2 losing seasons in 35 years. So, your process is good. This past transition for me has given me some time to think about things. The things I would have done differently or better. We were in a real new challenge in college football where building a front office was crucial, making sure that your hires were the right hires. I think most of the hindsight for me would be based upon not the culture or process of building a championship program, but probably the hiring process. and making sure that you have the pieces in place to handle where college football is today. Building out a really good front office immediately. I think we may have been in great places at the end, but we didn't get there soon enough, maybe. I think continuity with your coordinators is very important. Now, a former Broyles Award finalist under Kelly, Chip Long, was stunningly fired by Kelly as Notre Dame offensive coordinator following the 2019 season. The two have mended their relationship since that time. Long reached out after Kelly was dismissed at LSU. He thinks Kelly's going to coach again. He'd even work for him again. One of the special qualities I always thought about him, I just thought he had an amazing big picture outlook. Long told USA Today Sports, April 14, and the way he adapted through the years. He had a good thumb in the wind, a good pulse where things were nationally in football. Until then, there's going to be more Kelly on various media platforms, CBS College Football studio work, and some radio podcast spots expected among them. All three of Kelly's children, with wife Paki, continue working in or adjacent to college football. Patrick Kelly works with Ole Miss football general manager Austin Thomas. Kenzel Kelly is in his first year as linebackers coach for NCAA Division III program, John Carroll University, and daughter Grace works for the Name, Image, and Likeness Division of Athletes First. So finally, what does Brian Kelly miss most about coaching? Long regarded more NFL CEO coach type than collegial Goodfellow, Kelly insists it's the everyday football moments rather than penning his career epitaph that leaves him eager for another coaching opportunity. I think the motivator for me is what you miss, Kelly said. The decisions that were made at LSU, those were other people. I didn't have any control over that. What you lose is relationships with players. When I've been doing it my entire career, I miss that the most.
New questions raised during Rossini investigation from Nate Davis of USA Today. Diana Rossini, an NFL reporter and insider for The Athletic, resigned on April 14th amid controversy after pictures of her and New England Patriots coach Mike Vrabel were taken at an Arizona resort last month were published by the New York Post. In her resignation letter, she struck an often defiant tone, writing in part, "Commentators and various media have engaged in self-feeding speculation that is simply unmoored from the facts. Moreover, this media frenzy is hurtling forward without regard for the review process the Athletic is trying to complete. It continues to escalate, fueled by repeated leaks, and I have no interest in submitting to a public inquiry that has already caused far more damage than I am willing to accept. Rather than allowing this to continue, I have decided to step aside now, before my current contract expires on June 30th. I do so not because I accepted the narrative that has been constructed around this episode, but because I refuse to lend it further oxygen or to let it define me or my career." However, in a letter to the Athletics staff, executive editor Steven Ginsburg not only acknowledged her sudden departure, but expressed that during the course of the investigation into her conduct, new questions were raised. Ginsburg had originally expressed support for Rossini after the Post's photos published April the 7th showed her and Vrabel in bathing suits poolside, as well as hugging on a rooftop at the Ambient in Sedona, Arizona, days before each of them attended the NFL's annual league meeting in Phoenix. Both Vrabel, who is 50, and Rossini, 43, are married to other people with whom they have children. These photos are misleading and lack essential context, Ginsburg said in a statement on April the 8th. These were public interactions in front of many people. Diana is a premier journalist covering the NFL, and we're proud to have her. However, a few days later, The Athletic, which is owned by the New York Times, opened an investigation into the matter and effectively benched Rossini from further reporting on the NFL. In his letter to staffers on April the 14th, Ginsburg wrote in part, "While I can't share the details of our investigation into Diana's conduct, I want to emphasize that the leadership of The Athletic has taken this matter seriously from the moment that we learned about it. When this situation was brought to our attention last week, there were clear concerns, but we received a detailed explanation, and it was our instinct to support and defend a colleague while we continued to review the matter. As additional information emerged, new questions were raised that became part of our investigation. According to the Times Editorial Standards Handbook, relationships with sources require sound judgment and self-discipline to prevent the fact or appearance of partiality. Vrabel addressed the pictures the day after they were published. These photos show a completely innocent interaction, and any suggestion otherwise is laughable, he told the Post in a statement last week. This doesn't deserve any further response. He has not said anything since, and the Patriots haven't offered much more."
And, Jim, speaking of Spider-Man,
Okay.
moving on to the life section. And movies, Spider-Man grows up and gets a new name in a movie called New Day. Melissa Ruggieri and Brian Truitt of USA Today write a very short article with a nifty picture of the web-slinger. Las Vegas Dateline. Say hello to Maynard. The new moniker Peter Parker assumes in his new life was revealed during a sneak preview of Spider-Man Brand New Day on April 13th at CinemaCon, the annual convention for theater owners and studios. Now, Spidey stars Tom Holland and appeared virtually at the event to expound on the film in theaters this July 31st. I'm sure you've seen how big and fun the film is from the trailer, and a lot we did in new ways, he said. This is the most emotional Spider-Man we've ever made, and in some ways the most grown-up one. The clip shown at the Coliseum at Caesar's Palace plays off the cliffhanger of Spider-Man No Way Home, where Parker sacrificed his identity to save his friends. In the new film, Holland's Parker wanders into a house party where the host has an obsession with finding the identity of Spider-Man. He even has created a Spidey Tracker app. Parker's romantic partner, MJ, played by Holland's rumored new wife, Zendaya, also is in attendance and obviously does not recognize her crime-fighting beau, who introduced himself as Maynard. Parker also learns with a painful glance across the room that MJ has moved on with a new boyfriend. Along with Holland and Zendaya, the film stars Mark Ruffalo, Sadie Sink, Jacob Batalon, and Trammell Tillman. After debuting as teenage Peter Parker alongside Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther in 2016 Captain America Civil War, Holland headed a trio of Spider-Man films, 2017's Homecoming, 2019's Far From Home, and 2021's No Way Home. Holland's Spider-Man also appeared in the Avengers, blockbusters Infinity War and Endgame. In another part of Spider-Man's world, Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, the third and final installment in that franchise, is going to pick up where 2023 Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse concluded. The movie, which comes out June 18th of 2027, again features Shameik Moore voicing Brooklyn teen Miles Morales and Haley Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy, a.k.a. Spider-Gwen, Miles' pal from an alternative dimension. We are going places we literally could not have gone before, production designer Justin K. Thompson said at CinemaCon. In an upcoming film, Miles must make unlikely allies. He starts by escaping from being tied to a punching bag while confronting the villainous version of himself, the Prowler. You know what they say, don't watch the mouth, watch the hands, Miles says with a shrug. But he also proclaims his continued mission statement: "I just want to be taken seriously." And for Buffalo Bills fan, by the way, the voice of Brooklyn teen Gwen Stacy is Haley Steinfeld, who is Josh Allen's new wife.
Ah, okay. You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 1:45. Malcolm's outburst upsets Muniz's son. From Kimmy Robinson of USA Today. Frankie Muniz was so convincing when he reprised his role in the new Malcolm in the Middle reboot that he accidentally upset his son. The 40-year-old actor's wife, Paige, and 5-year-old son, Moz, often were on set with him as he filmed Malcolm in the Middle, Life's Still Unfair, in Vancouver. In the Hulu revival, Malcolm must confront years of lies that kept his family at an arm's length and allowed him to preserve his sanity. As Malcolm's carefully crafted world crumbled around him, Muniz's outburst in one scene unwittingly upset his kid. There is a scene where I'm talking about Malcolm's relationship with his family, and I talked about how crazy my family is and how I've got to stay away from them, Muniz told USA Today. Paige had to take him off the set because he was like, "Why doesn't Daddy like us?" In a few scenes, Malcolm can't help but revert to an angry teenage boy who is exasperated with his family, including loving but bumbling dad Hal, played by Bryan Cranston, and stretched-out matriarch Lois, played by Jane Kaczmarek. In the first episode, after his parents unexpectedly dropped by and realized he'd kept his high school-aged daughter from them for more than a decade, Malcolm yells at his parents, "You made me do this. This family's nonstop antisocial behavior and mindless belligerence and myopic priorities are toxic to me. Every single bad thing that happened to my life is your fault." Moz didn't understand that, and I was not talking about him and Paige, because he doesn't know me as an actor, Muniz says. Moz primarily sees his dad as a race car driver. Muniz, a lifelong racing enthusiast who returned to the profession full-time in 2023, now drives in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Since Moz was born, Muniz has taken on only a few acting roles, including one-episode arcs in The Rookie and New Amsterdam. He doesn't understand the concept of pretending stuff for TV yet. He doesn't watch a lot of shows, Muniz explains. He hasn't seen me as an actor necessarily. He only knows me as a race car driver or being interviewed talking about me. Having his wife and son on the set as he performed alongside his on-screen daughter, who was Keely Karsten, and girlfriend Kiana Madeira, was uncharted territory. That was an interesting dynamic of talking about how I love another woman and not mommy, and how my family's crazy, according to Muniz. Muniz's family set's visits also resulted in an unplanned cameo in Life's Still Unfair. It's a blank and you'll miss it moment in the anniversary party, but Muniz's real-life family is seen dancing with other relatives, or other revelers. About 8 minutes into the finale, Paige, in a form-fitting brown dress, faces away from the camera as she holds her sleepy-looking son, whose face is fully visible. They're in there for just a second, Muniz says. It's so rare to get to recreate something that people loved 20 years ago and get to go back into that world. I wanted to be able to look back and have them be a part of what made my life.
Into the streaming section, Fanning Pfeiffer almost got in trouble. Claire Mulroy of USA Today writes, Elle Fanning as a young mother on OnlyFans, Nick Offerman as a former pro wrestler, Michelle Pfeiffer as an ex-Hooters waitress, starting anew with a religious boyfriend, Nicole Kidman as an overzealous wrestler turned no-nonsense lawyer. Now, each scenario sounds quirky and A-list enough to deserve its own show. But this impressive ensemble comes together for the lovable Margot's Got Money Troubles. That's an Apple TV series out now, which follows college student Margot, played by Elle Fanning, who gets pregnant after an affair with her English professor, named Mark, played by Michael Angarano. She starts an OnlyFans account to support her child, when it's clear he won't. She finds some relief when her estranged father, played by Offerman, re-enters her life, eager to get to know his grandson, but soon is embroiled in a custody battle after Mark finds out about her online presence. Sitting together for a media day ahead of the series release, Fanning and Pfeiffer appear more friends than co-stars who play mother and daughter. They finish each other's sentences and interrupt each other playfully. It's not the first time Fanning and Pfeiffer have worked together. They both appeared in 2001's I Am Sam, when Fanning was just a child, and later in 2014's Maleficent. But it's the closest. I feel like our minds kind of melded in the process of this. I could tell what she's thinking about across the room, Fanning tells USA Today. Pfeiffer confirms it. She can tell. It lends itself to having the love that we have for each other and the safety. I think it shows in the show. I really do. We're able to just go to all of those places and understand each other. And I'm just so lucky that Michelle's in my life. I love her. Between Margot's newfound motherhood, Cheyenne's attempt to purify herself with a religious boyfriend, and the reappearance of Margot's estranged father, Jinx, played by Offerman, things get messy. There are screaming matches and cold shoulders, punches are thrown, bones are broken. Kidman, playing an attorney in a legal battle, does not become a central part of the story until about, mid-season. But it's mostly a lot of fun. So much fun that while filming on the Vegas Strip for episode 5, they were pulled over by cops for partying in character out of the sunroof of a limo, wearing goofy bachelorette-style hats. They thought we were real partiers, Pfeiffer tells USA Today. The actors assumed it was a last-minute addition to the script. Well, finally, after the third time, they yelled, I said, I think those are real policemen. Then we start lowering ourselves down with the penis hats, Fanning says. It wasn't the first time Fanning stepped into Margot's shoes. She also voiced the headstrong young mother in the audiobook version of Ruthie Thorpe's 2024 novel of the same name. She was a fan of the book from the start, as were longtime Hollywood couple Pfeiffer and creator David E. Kelley. When it came time to film, Thorpe was heavily involved. She even handed over a stack of research she had done on OnlyFans and pro wrestling, says producer Ava Anderson. It's so heartwarming and tender and heartbreaking at times, but also so just laugh out loud funny, Fanning says. The characters were so vividly drawn and complex, and I just wanted to live inside that world in Fullerton, California, and get to share Margot on the screen. That's a challenge. You're always nervous of, am I going to be able to fulfill that feeling that I got when I read the book? With the help of two established OnlyFans, cam girls, played by Rico Nasty and Lindsay Normington, Margot evolves to a whole on-camera persona, the hungry ghost. Pictures of lots of neon, elaborate chromatic costumes, and stripper poles. After reading the book, Kelley was eager to tackle the very relatable, very universal themes, which include addiction, parenting, financial struggles, estrangement, and many, many ethical and moral dilemmas. I always consider the viewer as one of the characters in a series. How are they going to interpret the material? What are they going to think? Does the series offer an opportunity for the viewers to explore their own values? Kelley says. That's the greatest success for me. When I hear back that people are arguing on their own couch about the choices that the characters are making on the screen, I think we'll present some of that in the pilot episode. Fanning says it was Margot's resilience that drew her to the character in the first place. Kelly praises the actress's ability to hit this character on every single level. I felt her as the young, struggling woman trying to make a go of life as a young mother. I felt her as a budding writer and her creative core. The combination of humanity and raw honesty, and also her comedic skills, because Margot, that was a pretty delicious cocktail to play, Kelly says. We were just blown away by Elle's ability to totally capture all those elements. Margot is one of several big book-to-screen adaptations Fanning is tackling. She'll play a younger Effie Trinket in Sunrise on the Reaping, based on Suzanne Collins' 2025 Hunger Games prequel, in November. She has just started filming The Nightingale, based on the historical novel by Kristen Hanna, starring opposite her older sister, Dakota Fanning. Owning a production company with her sister means Fanning has started reading books in a different way. I just can't help it. I think because I'm trained with script reading, whenever I read a book, I see it as a film, or try to. Now that's just how I picture it when I'm reading. Now that we're actually able to be producers and create stuff, it's like, well, I enjoyed this, and now we can actually just make it happen.
Robin Williams present in every scene of new Jumanji, from Melissa Ruggieri of USA Today. If Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, and Jack Black are in the house, it means a lot of ribald comedy. It also means another Jumanji film is on the way. The trio appeared April 13th at CinemaCon, the convention for movie theater owners and studios, to introduce the latest film in the franchise, Jumanji, Open World, out Christmas Day. I feel like in this one the game rules don't apply, Hart said, in between taking good-natured jabs at a sorta drunk Johnson. We know what this franchise means to people, Black said before taking an exaggerated pause and yelling, "It means a lot." A short clip prevented Johnson's Dr. Smolder, Bravestone, Hart, Franklin, Mouse, Finbar, and Black Professor Shelley Overton on another mission. There's the late comedy icon who was Robin Williams, I mentioned in the headlines of this article, starred in the 1995 film based on a children's book of the same name. Williams played Alan Parrish, the man who was dropped back into the real world after a quarter century trapped inside a supernatural board game. There is a little Easter egg for Robin that is in every single scene, Johnson said, disclosing that the knot is one of the original dice used in the original film. Robin, Johnson added, as we like to say, this one's for you. You've been listening to a reading of USA Today for Thursday, April 16, 2026. We read USA Today weekdays at noon. For more information, call 821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ken Drost
and Jim Duffy.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability